Hey there, great people. Thanks so much for dialing in. Touching base to let you know that as with all of our content, this is general in nature. It does not take into account your specific or personal circumstances nor your individual risk profile, and as such should not be acted on accordingly. If you get value from this and you want to explore some things further, I strongly recommend that you get personal advice from a qualified professional. Hello everyone and welcome back to another very special Q&A. I'm super pumped to have Mitch Collins from Geelong Pharmacy Lawyers here. Mitch is a top-notch estate planning specialist and he has a real knack for explaining this dry content in easy to digest information. This episode is going to be particularly valuable to people wondering what is a will, what is a power of attorney, what is a testamentary trust, do I even need these documents, how can I protect and stop future partners from dwindling away what I've built, and just making sure we've protected what we've got. Thanks heaps for tuning in. Hope you find it valuable. Let's get into it. G'day, Mitch. Thanks so much for jumping on with us today.
Hey, John.
Good to have you here. So Mitch is a gun, estate planning and commercial lawyer based in Geelong, Vic, and he's helped me and a number of our clients organise their financial and legal lives. So Mitch, I'm just hoping you can take us through a bit of your origin story. How does someone get into estate planning law?
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily something when I first started uni 10 years ago that I was always going to be an estate planning lawyer. I really didn't know what sort of law I was going to go into, to be honest. But as my sort of career has progressed, I found estate planning particularly a really interesting area of law, and also one I've been able to sort of really build on over the past 3 or 4 years and become a bit of a, I suppose you might, don't want to say expert, but we'll say expert in that area. And yeah, it's just something I really, really enjoy. Obviously, I do a few other different areas of law around commercial and business, which works pretty well with estate planning law. So yeah.
All that stuff goes in hand, and I'm happy to class you as an expert, Mitch, having dealt with you a bit. So I think most people would find this stuff pretty dry, pretty boring, wills, trusts, power of attorneys, this sort of stuff. What about this stuff makes you buzz and excited to skip into work?
Yeah, so definitely a fair sort of judgment to think that it might be a bit, dry and boring. I know when I first started practicing in this area, I sort of thought the same thing as well. But as I sort of touched on before, the further I've got into it, the more my knowledge base is built up, and I've actually found it to be really, really interesting and something I'm really passionate about. Which, one, I think clients really love, but two, it's obviously beneficial for the clients themselves to have someone who knows what they're talking about. But what keeps it interesting is just purely the fact every single person or couple has a completely different set of circumstances to the previous person or couple I've dealt with, and then being able to hear their story, understand their circumstances, and then being able to build that tailored estate plan for them. That's what really keeps it interesting. And additionally on top of that, just dealing with people. I love dealing with people, and obviously estate planning extremely personal. So, being with them from the very start, when I have that first meeting with them or I'm introduced to them, until the very end when their estate planning documents, wills, powers of attorney, medical decision-making documents are signed, being able to have that personal touch with them and, talk with them, it definitely keeps it interesting. And as I said, no one set of circumstances is ever the same whatsoever.
Yeah, brilliant. And you're delivering so much peace of mind with those things, albeit a little bit dry for the layman. So just back to your sort of origin story again, who's been the best mentor that you've had along the way, and what's some great advice that you've had, or you might have had multiple people that have guided you
Yeah,
on your journey?
I've had a lot of, obviously we were supervised a couple of years of supervised legal practice, and I had a couple of really good mentors who'd been around the blocks for a while, and they were able to impart a lot of their wisdom on me. But there's probably no one individual that sticks out the most. But yeah, just generally even not just in the legal world, financial planners, accountants, I've always tried to just sort of take as much knowledge as possible from them. Obviously, we're in different fields, but I've sort of learned as time's gone on, it's interchangeable, the areas of practice, some of the knowledge, that crosses over those different areas of practice.
Yeah. And that's good thing about like law and that sort of stuff. You have to cut your teeth in all streams, don't you, before you sort of go down one pathway. So you get a good look at it and before you have to sort of make a call. So that's really good. Now into the good stuff with your experience in wills and estates and these types of things. What are some of the, just even day to day, or some of the biggest mistakes you'll see people making when it comes to estate planning, Mitch?
Yeah, great question. So one is the lack of estate planning.
Yep.
Sort of not quite answering your question, but they reckon about 50% of people die in Australia without a will. And as we'll sort of touch on a bit later, like having a will is super, super important. But the other point is that people don't review their wills regularly. A lot of people tend to set and forget. And then, a lot of people doing the will in the first place is obviously a very stressful thing. You have to think about a lot of challenging, areas of your life. And then once it's sort of completed, that's it, which I can understand why people do it. But, that set and forget approach, but ultimately not updating and reviewing it to align with, change of circumstances, change of jobs, change of relationships, all that sort of thing. It's a real big pitfall. And I just find that the more you update it, even if it's just, every year when you go see, say, for example, a financial planner or your accountant, you go, okay, let's have a look at my will, even if they just look over it or they have a set of sort of indicators for when they should be considering going to talking to an estate planning lawyer, just to make sure that it does accurately reflect, your circumstances and your changing circumstances.
Yeah. And we all hear horror stories, families torn apart, years in court. I suppose without naming names, do you sort of see this stuff day to day in your travels? Is that sort of stuff really common and come up?
Yeah, 100%. So these stories are far too common. And, I've seen countless families torn apart over an estate. It's unfortunate, but it's just a reality. So one particular horror story I've seen it in a couple instances, but the one I'll talk about is a beneficiary. They received near enough to $500,000 in a couple of years. That was going down the drain. They hadn't purchased the house or anything of substance. It just been sort of swindled away. That could have been prevented had of the deceased being one of the person's parents had the appropriate estate planning in place, i.e. a testamentary trust will. So it could have extended that $500,000 for a long time and been earning interest on it. But unfortunately, within a 2-year period, that was pretty much gone.
Yeah, no one wins there.
Not at all.
And so I think when I'm having conversations day to day with people and trying to encourage them to not be in the 50% that aren't prepared or have an estate plan, I reckon some of the real fears I would hear from people. The first one is future partners getting their grubby mitts on what they've built. Something I hear all the time is I've worked my ass off to build this legacy or build this wealth. And they're terrified that future kids' partners might be, I think the saying, sort of fast cars and slow horses, or backing that sort of saying. So, and as such, get their hands on it and waste it or do something wrong. So, is this sort of concern, is that paranoia? Is that something that actually needs to be planned for and thought about?
Yeah, 100%. That needs to be planned for and thought about. One of the common themes of testamentary trust wills is something I really like to push is your funds that you've worked, your entire life for, work extremely hard for. By having these correct structures in place, you can ensure that your assets, i.e. your belongings, your money, property, all that sort of thing, stays within your bloodline. So that way protecting it from, kids' partners, because it is far too common that, they might have a relationship breakdown, the child and their partner, and ultimately, that money that their parent might have given them through their will, through their standard will, is up for grabs. So, yeah, just making sure you do have those important protections in place and the correct structures in place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So your trust can be written as a bloodline trust, is what you're saying, and that can sort of protect the capital, and the family can still enjoy some of the benefits of the income. Is that what you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So the capital of it's going to be protected. There's, it's not as if, if say it's a really good relationship between the child and their partner, it's not as if that partner's completely excluded out from receiving the benefit of it. The family can still have it, but that capital of it, which is the chunk of your estate, is going to be protected from that partner.
Yeah. Another of the real concerns I would hear is when you have that blended family or second marriage situation. So, dad's got, kids from a first marriage with a new wife, maybe new kids together in that situation. How do people generally need to think? I guess, what do people need to consider or think about to family plan around this and fairly protect everyone?
Yeah, of course. So obviously blood and family is becoming more and more prevalent these days. So ensuring that, you know, you have those right protections in is paramount. So my advice on that is just an estate planning lawyer will be able to help you out in that sense that what's more and more common as well as blended families, is people making claims on the estate. So Part 4 claims, so it's where they've been left out of the estate and they think they have the deceased had a moral obligation to provide for them. So there's no way to ever 100% bulletproof, I say, a will from someone who's been left out. But if you do see an estate planning lawyer, they're going to tell you if they think this person that's been left out, i.e. a stepchild, or even just a child for that matter, is going to, you know, have a successful claim at the estate, or their chances of having a successful claim on the estate. So what an estate planning lawyer can do is put in there the appropriate clauses that say why this person's been left out. Now, the will maker, i.e. the person, the testator, they're going to have their own reasons for why they might want to leave someone out. But seeing an estate planning lawyer, they're going to build on that clause and make sure that that person that's been left out, that mitigates the possibility of them making a successful claim against the estate. So in that way, making sure that the other beneficiaries, the named beneficiaries, they're protected as much as possible from having that sort of the estate value dwindle away.
Yeah, gotcha. And these are the sort of clauses or correct wording that you're not getting from a will kit from the post office. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. They, bane of my existence, those will kits, they just, no good.
Well, that might tie into a later question, but what about and this one might drift slightly out of the estate planning space as well, Mitch, so you can think a bit broader here, but the other real practical thing, things like business owners, tradies, professionals, they've built successful businesses. What's a structuring or estate planning mistake that you'd commonly see, or a pitfall that could be avoided?
Yeah, so those people that are operating businesses, you know, that they might be a sole trader, but I personally see more often than not, it's held in a trust structure, or it might be in a company. So it's really important that when you are seeing an estate planning lawyer, that you are making plans for what happens when you pass away, because it not always necessarily just be included in the will. The lawyer will also need to look at the family trust, the company, the shareholders agreement, the partnership agreement, if it's a partnership of two people or in entities. So that's where I suppose two different areas are going to tie in there. You are going to firstly look at the instrument that's running the business, like I said, whether it's a trust deed or a company constitution. Get all the facts from that and then draw that over and apply that to the estate plan. Because something I do see here is, let's just say for argument's sake, there's a tradie who's an electrician, and then the partner is, let's just say, a speech pathologist or something like that. So what's going to happen there is, if there's not the appropriate estate plan put in order, let's just say the electrician has, you know, it's run through a company, and you think that when he passes away, or the electrician passes away, the partner is then going to be effectively running that business if the proper estate plan is not put in order. Now, naturally, you'd think that a pathologist is probably going to struggle to run a sparky business. So making sure that those appropriate measures are put in place to ensure that, you know, you direct your trustee to sell the business, or, you know, you appoint someone who's familiar with the business to be able to keep it running, and that way maximizing the benefits of it.
Yep, all your agreements and everything needs to work hand in glove. That's great. So just in terms of practical stuff, you know, often I'll hear people have got a will from 5, 10, 15 years ago, minimal kids, wealth positions completely different. Maybe they've married or partnered up. So what for you are the red flags there that scream this needs to be updated, Mitch?
Yeah, so just in a general view, there's 4 times you should be looking at updating your will. Absolute minimum. I'm going to definitely encourage more than that, but obviously I understand the reality of things. People are busy. Never should be too busy for this sort of thing, but still, the minimum 4 times is when you first get married or enter into a de facto relationship. Second time is when you're having children. Now, this is particularly important because you want to have the appropriate guardianship clauses in there, which is what happens if you and your partner are to pass away, who looks after your kids that are under 18, because you want that in there. The third time is when your kids or your children are sort of, you know, 18, 21, coming of age, moving to that next part of their life. And then the fourth time is as you're sort of looking to transition towards retirement. So they're the 4 times minimum. But then on top of that, you should also be looking at your will or having a discussion with your estate planning lawyer or any other sort of professional. These are the questions I'd be asking. Have I bought or sold a property? Have I received an inheritance? Have any of my beneficiaries entered into or ended a long-term relationship, i.e. a de facto relationship? Have I started a business or have I sold a business? Is someone named in my will passed away, or I no longer want to include them in my will?
Yeah, great. That's great insights and practical tips. I just want to talk about this concept of a testamentary trust, and maybe you can even just help us understand the key documents. What actually is a will? What is a power of attorney? And more importantly, this concept of a testamentary trust, because I find that one people have no idea about, and often some estate planning lawyers don't even recommend them. So, yeah, what is a testamentary trust, and how does it work with those other key documents?
Yeah, so it is a challenging topic to understand when you first hear it. There's no doubt about that. So the idea of an estate planning lawyer is to be able to clearly explain that to you and how it operates. The way I look at it is a testamentary trust is a trust that's put into your will, written into your will. Now that trust isn't too dissimilar to a family or discretionary trust that you might have operating during your lifetime. So yeah, going back, you have your will in there, which is going to outline, the person who's going to manage your will, guardians, that sort of thing. Then within the will itself is going to be what we call a testamentary trust. So it's effectively a trust deed. And what it's doing is upon your death, you're creating however many trusts you decide to create. Let's just say maybe two, one for each child if you've got two children. And then it's going to outline all the terms of that trust deed, of the testamentary trust, i.e. who's the person who manages it, the trustee, who the beneficiaries are, what happens if someone passes away, how long the trust lasts for, which is 80 years less a day, and outline all the other key terms. A lot of it is to do with financial flexibility and tax flexibility, and the things that when you pass away, the appropriate professional dealing with it is going to need to know to figure out their powers and what the trustee and those sort of people can do.
Yep. Great. So it provides a bit more flexibility, a bit more peace of mind, and a bit more potential tax effectiveness. Just in plain English, when does it make sense to bother with one of these?
Yeah, so a common misconception is that they're only for rich people, which I hear a lot. So my view is that I'm a massive advocate for them. I just think they're fantastic. So rule of thumb is if there's anything less than $300,000 in the estate, it's probably not going to be beneficial for you by the time each financial year you spend the money on the financial professionals, tax returns, if you need to get legal advice, that sort of thing. So $300,000 is the first sort of indicator. Anything above that, I'm recommending it, but I'm going to particularly recommend it if there's blended families, if there's stepchildren, obviously in the blended families, where you've maybe got a beneficiary that's spendthrift, as we call it, one who might, as I sort of touched on before with that story, you're a bit worried that maybe they're going to spend money in an inappropriate manner, i.e. financially immature, is the term we use, and basically we're just wanting to potentially someone just have those tax benefits for a longer time. So really, honestly, I think anyone that's got over that $300,000, you should be getting a testamentary trust. But again, blended families, particularly concerns about people that maybe might spend money quicker than they can sort of handle. And yeah.
And other complexities like business. And just on that 300,000 threshold, the key word you used was to the estate. So we're thinking about things, not just what's in the bank or share portfolio or super fund, but also if there's life insurances or maybe a home or a property there as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. So just on that $300,000 threshold, Mitch, as sort of a false threshold, we're not just talking about, I think the key word you used was the estate value, and we're not just talking about what's in the bank account or share portfolio, but often there's some life insurance or other asset pools that people are not thinking about. Is that something that you'll see pretty often?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of people might not think they have assets. They might not have a property or anything like that. But when they have that discussion with their financial planner and lawyer, they realize that, okay, well, I've got life insurance here, just as one example that is going to form part of my estate. And life insurance is, can be quite a substantial amount of money. So it's important for people to think that even though they might not have a property or, not a number of properties or anything like that, that, there can still be quite a bit of money in that asset pool. So it's, good to think about.
Great. Well, very good. Thank you, Mitch. And just before I close off, is there any one particular estate planning myth that you'd like to debunk today that does your head in?
Yeah, so There's actually two. So there's one I touched on earlier, and that is that testamentary trusts are just for the rich.
For the rich,
A very common misconception. And the other one I hear far too often is if you don't have a will in place, the government's going to get your money. That's not the case. The only time the government or, the state revenue office is ever going to receive your money is where you have no living relatives. So if you pass away without a will, I'm not saying don't get a will in order, but if you pass away without a will, your belongings, your estate is going to go to your partner and children, and then it's going to go to parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and cousins. That's in Victoria anyway. That's called intestacy laws and dying intestate. But in saying that, definitely get a will in order.
Yep. And it's obviously just a bit more of a headache when you fall into the intestacy laws. There's a bit more paperwork, and the people you leave behind, it's a bit more difficult. So that's a good point.
100%. Yeah, leaving a bit of a dog's breakfast for, the people that are going to have to deal with your estate when you pass away.
Very good, mate. And just how can people hear more from you or find out about you a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So as you touched on before, we're based in Geelong, but we service estate planning clients all over Australia. So if you do want to reach out and find out a bit more about, how your estate plan might look, we do free consults and can give you a picture of how that looks. So feel free to reach out to me on our website or socials.
Yep. So LinkedIn, website, we'll drop it in the show notes. Very good, mate. Thanks very much for your help and your time today. And look forward to hopefully getting that 50% number a bit higher.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Bye.